Okay, so you got the message that we're recording. It's Friday evening, October 24th, the 4th. Friday, we just moved from the 4th Tuesday to the 4th Friday, and we moved an hour earlier, so now the meetings are at 7 p.m. Eastern Time instead of 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And we have a little bit smaller group than usual, and maybe that's why changing the time and the date and everything may take some adjusting for people.
Yeah, I think one of the emails I got said the date was the 25th.
Oh,
Oh, that doesn't help either. Okay.
Yeah, it said Friday, but the 25th.
Yikes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let me share my screen and I'll bring up the notes of some things we want to discuss. Da-da-da. Where did the share go? Share. Okay. So, okay. The big announcement, of course, is the Cosmic Discovery Conference, April 24th to 26th in Nashville, Tennessee, where we're presenting the discoveries that are being made, and everything is up and running. You can now register. You can reserve the hotel room. So if you go to cosmobiology.org or cosmobiologyinstitute.org, and you click right on the opening screen for more details, you'll see the information and the registration and all that stuff is here. Um, so that's something to keep in mind. And let me get back to my notes. We're thinking of having a second meeting during the day. A lot of interest in the research is coming out of Europe. Um, and, it's like crazy hours at night. So we're playing around with the idea, or the thought has occurred, maybe we should have two meetings a month, one that's at a convenient time in Europe, and one that's at this time. So if there are days of the week when those of you are in Europe, we have only a handful of people here. And in fact, at the moment, we have just, less than half a dozen, and at least two of you are in Europe. So, we're getting a large percent of people in Europe. So you can put in the chat. You can also email me directly, um, up, Santino at astrologydc.com about days of the week and times that you think would be good. Uh, yeah, so you can just let me know. If we do it a weekday, what would be evening in Europe would be a good idea. So anyway, it's just an idea. We don't have a lot of attendees, so splitting up into two groups could be a problem. But on the other hand, we are an international organization. We want to respond to wherever interest is, and interest is relatively strong in Europe. So it's something I think we need to respond to. So you can let me know what you think of that idea, and we can do it. Okay, now our one of our main topics for tonight is, by the way, I'm still getting over the flu or something, so I might be a little congested and stuff. Um, we got the responses to the questionnaire. Sterling and Christopher or Vincent, do you remember we had what, about a dozen responses, I think? People who, something in that range. And Christopher totaled up what the median and mean is. Mean means, of course, the middle score. Um, and there were four topics that there's interest in doing research. What we would like to do in the research meetings, we've had these research meetings for what, a few months or so. We've shared ideas about research. We're now thinking, let's take a research project and share ideas on how to do it and pursue together a research project. If you like that idea, these are the ones out of the list that we gave that got the strongest interest. Depression, heart attack, end of life research basically means like predicting when people would die, and a mundane topic of wars and conflict. Um, so they all scored about the same, and we can pick one of these topics. And first of all, we can discuss the pros and cons of them. And whoever shows up gets to decide. So you guys are here, you get to decide what we should do, where we can go. And this way we'll get hands-on experience doing research and approaching things, um, and what the issues are, and what the research designs are. So, number one, do you guys like this idea that we focus on a research project for the next few weeks or few months or however long it goes on? We can still entertain questions and other topics, but we'll keep coming back to a research project. A, does that sound good? And of these topics, let's discuss the pluses and minuses of them and what looks good. So what do you guys think? Especially, so Bernhard is here, another European. So we got, like I said, we're thinking about having something in evenings in, you know, England and Germany are only one time zone apart, um, appealing to that part of the world. So, half of us here that are not on the board are in those time zones. Um, and probably would be a lot more if we were more convenient time for you guys. So, do you like this idea? And we can start discussing which of these topics, what the pros and cons are of the, and especially those of you who are not board members. So Nelson, Kai, Emmett, Bernard, Ton, what do you think about this idea of uh, doing a research project, and what do you think about these topics? Or do you have some other topic in mind that you'd like us to look at? What would be a good design, strategy, all that stuff, and how would we implement it? And we can go as far as we want with it. We can conduct the research together in detail if we want to go that far. Any thoughts?
I think it would be interesting to pursue wars just because I've seen many research projects that are designed around natal charts and not nearly as many around mundane significations.
Okay. Okay, cool. So Kai is interested in wars. Uh, it's not natal. Now, the end of life would be predictive. The other two are strictly natal. But yeah, it would be mundane, which would be a very different kind of thing.
Mhm.
Than
Question, when you say heart attack, you mean heart attack prone, not having a heart attack at a certain age. Is that what you mean? Because you say it's not, you said one is event. And
well,
I want to think,
that's an interesting point. The heart attack could be both natal and predictive.
yeah,
Who has had a heart attack? Um, and then we can look at the
yeah.
prediction of it. So that's a good, thank you,
I
Vincent.
made also a research about end of life natal, and I had 100% success.
Right. I want to talk about each of these four topics, what's been done with them. Um, well, let's
That's a
go to,
joke. That was a joke, Santino.
yeah, no, no, yeah, right. Nothing's ever 100%. Um, but you did get excellent results.
But I meant natal, everybody's gonna end of life. Everybody dies, so it's very easy.
Okay. The joke went right over my head. Yeah. Yeah. Taxes and death, they say, are the two things you can count on. Okay. Well, let's go through these and think about, and we can all discuss things that we're aware of. Depression, we had some discussion. Angela mentioned, for example, that um, depression, is like a little tricky for diagnosis.
Exactly.
Yeah, like I did research on bipolar disorder, and I think bipolar disorder has much clearer
Yes.
in the psychological, what is that thing called, the SM whatever? It's whatever, it's clearly defined. It's pretty uncommon relative to depression. I mean, everybody gets depressed sometimes. And what do you define as depression and how long would it have to be? So it's a little bit tricky,
Hmm.
how people get classified. So that's one problem with depression. Um, a positive with depression is it's something people are interested in because a lot of people deal with it. We have had success with other psychological things, such as the bipolar disorder, eating disorders. We've gotten good results in that. I'm just looking at the positive and negative. We do have data, I think, from Master Data Bank. Let me go over my thoughts about all four, and then everybody can chime in. What your thinking is. Heart attacks. My thought on it. I'll just do a little monologue here, and then you guys can do your own monologue and add in. Heart attack, one thing that I've noticed in my research is that if something can be explained non-astrologically, I do not get good results. Now, you could say, well, the astrology accounts for those non-astrological things, like with heart attack, what your diet is. So the astrology would tell you why you have a bad diet or you don't exercise enough or whatever. But those indirect things, I don't get as good results from. Um, and heart attack is going to have a lot of things to do with, um, diet, exercise, stress, a lot of environmental things, a lot of things about where you grew up. People, eat more junk food in certain countries that might be prone to give you heart attacks, et cetera. So there's environmental conditions that might make people in certain countries, certain situations. Um, there's a lot of complex factors, and in advanced statistical analysis, we control for those things, but it gets hard to control for all of them, and it makes the analysis more difficult. That's a problem I have with heart attack. The good thing about heart attack is it's fairly clearly defined. Of course, it's associated with age. Another thing is if something else doesn't kill you, a heart attack will. So, um, there's a lot of complexities there. It might be that they lived long enough to get a heart attack in some cases. The end of life research, Vincent has done some fantastic research on death using secondary progressions and now more recently with transits. And Christopher and I received an email from a researcher, again in Europe, a lot of research oriented people in Europe, who's interested in using primary directions. He uses a lot of medieval techniques like primary directions. He's certain that they work. This happens as astrologers, right? You use something, you see that, oh my God, this works. Primary directions work for major events, including death. So, let me, as we say in America, put my money where my mouth is. In other words, let's see if I'm right, which I love. He wants to confirm it. Now, what I like about this end of life research is that Vincent has some outstanding research using secondary progressions and transits. He's going to present that at the conference, the Cosmic Discovery Conference. What about primary directions? That would be fascinating. We could, the fellow in Europe who wants to do this research, he understands a lot about research methods and technical things. We could combine his ideas, bring in Vincent's way Vincent did this clever way of creating control groups. We can think of all these design issues and we could see if we can get the software to do the analysis. So what if primary directions also work? That would give us three techniques predicting end of life. Do they use the same planetary combinations? I think that would be fascinating. Maybe to do it with primary directions, I'd have to consult with the fellow who wants to do this research, tell him we would like to do it in our research meetings. If he can't make it because it's the middle of the night, then he can watch the recordings and email us information. So that's a possibility. The wars I like for the same reason Kai does. It's something different. It's mundane. Um, it's reasonably clearly defined, wars of different levels. Um, One thing about mundane research is once you exhaust your data, you've exhausted it. This is a problem I had with the gold research. Um, After I did all the gold research, I had to wait 10 years for more data. So there's only so many wars that are well defined historically. But anyway, that would be a very different and interesting kind of thing. Um, and basically, you don't have you could have a natal chart of a country, but a lot of the work is just done with transit. So it often is like a simple design. But it leads to questions of whether ingresses work, whether new moons and full moons work, do eclipses work, and it gives us a way to evaluate a lot of techniques astrologers believe in, like eclipses and ingresses, to see if transits trigger them. So it gives us insight into some things that have not been researched as much as natal. So it kind of open up some new doors. Those are my thoughts, pluses and minuses. What do you guys think? What other additional thoughts do you have? Oh,
Can I
Christopher mentioned some good research on wars has been done, and so that gives us a basis. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
can I give my 2 cents?
Okay,
Hmm? Sorry?
okay. I was just
Okay,
to say,
Vincent, you can go for it. Yeah.
just one name. Tom Stedel has done a fantastic research about war.
Right. So
Yeah.
Tom Stedel or Stedall, however you pronounce it, he has done research on wars, very impressive.
Very fantastic.
Yeah, and
Okay.
there's an online database for wars that he used. So, we might be able to use that same data and analyze it differently, discover some new things. I remember he found that Mars and Saturn were implicated a lot when it came to war. But the fact that there has been some good research by Tom done on this, it's an opportunity for us to add on to it and expand it.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing I think is important is to replicate what he did. I've done some reanalysis of existing research, and sometimes this can become controversial. People evaluate the research differently. Some researchers say, wow, that research is great. Other researchers are saying, no, 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 I'm seeing this problem, that problem, and it leads to healthy debate. So there's a lot of issues in research, a lot of things to evaluate. And I think that coming back to two excellent researchers here, Vincent and Christopher, have carefully read this research. I haven't carefully read it. They're very impressed by it. I think it will be good to look at it. Exactly what did he do? What are the effect sizes? Are there controls? My big problem with a lot of research is that I see a lot of research as building models and not testing models. And then when you use the criteria for testing models and building models, it drives me crazy.
And me too. Santino, don't forget to give the word to I apologize, Nelson. I talked
no
at
problem.
the same time than you. We forgot
No,
to.
I just
No. Let's take our time with this, and then we'll Nelson, we got time. Nelson will come in. So,
sure.
but I think that analyzing what he's done, I think this could be exciting. It really could be, and Yeah, but go ahead, Nelson. What were your thoughts?
No, what I want to say, and it was regarding the four themes that we have there. My tendency would be for the depression, and because that is something that has to do with a more personal application into the health of people. I'm not saying that the heart attack or the end of life does not has a very direct impact in people's lives, but depression is such a prevalent condition that people feel nowadays that any research that we could do could
Mhm.
be very useful for people's lives and put out the research out there for something as complex as a depression. So I would like to, in case someone picks this matter, I would like to participate and to do whatever I can for this theme if you see it. Um, like the importance that I see that the depression can have, and the I don't know, the service that the astrology could provide for the psychology of it. Not saying that the other themes are not important, of course it is, but I can see that for people's lives, I don't know, maybe the depression would be my first pick.
Yeah, I like all of these themes, and I'm interested in depression too. Uh, the one thing I'm concerned about is, where can we get the data? At
Yeah,
Astro Databank for Rodden rating of B or better from 1900 to 225, there's only about 244 people at the Astro Databank site who are categorized with
mhm.
depression. So, we may need more than that to really come up with some results.
How many? How many do you say? 20?
At Astro Databank Online today, about 244 people.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
1900
It's not,
2025, Rodden
it's not
rating B or
enough. It's
better.
not enough.
I'm in this Sirius software, which has an old, it's outdated, it's not current of the Astrodatabank data. It's showing 300 total, 162 with AA accuracy. Um, if I change it to A accuracy,
Yeah, but don't forget what you
to
said at the beginning. So the diagnosis is not as clear. So how can we trust that? You can trust for
right.
heart attack, but this
Yeah, so
is
we're in the range of
unclear. It's
250 to 300. Yeah, I mean, Barbara Bush, I don't know. I guess she was diagnosed. I mean, that was a first lady,
yeah,
wife of, yeah, but you're right. I mean, some of these are very questionable. And
yeah.
also, when Astra Databank flags something, it's what I found is you have to go into the biographies because sometimes the reference to whatever it is you're talking about, depression, is relatively mild. I mean, I've seen cases where they say somebody's classified as depression because they researched depression. They were a doctor, a psychiatrist, you know, and they're there for depression. I mean, literally, I've seen that like multiple times. And sometimes it's a relative or a spouse. And
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
yeah, you've had
A
the
rel
same experience, Starling. Yeah.
yeah, like a relative, and it's like, but that didn't help at all. It was, yeah.
I remember one time I was researching something, I was starting to build a model, and I had two or three people that weren't fitting the model, and then I went in and looked at it, and they didn't have the trait.
See,
And I was thinking, oh, my model is really working well. It picked out the. So anyway, it does get. So not only is the diagnosis not clear, it's pretty fuzzy. So I find when I use Astro Databank, I basically have to look at every single um, biography, skim it quickly to get an idea. But anyway,
If we could get access to uh, cases of people who are clinically diagnosed with depression, that can be harder today because of medical privacy laws, but
exactly. Mm-hmm.
some
yeah,
people are have more experience with getting a hold of data than I do, so it might be possible.
Yeah, and there's so many variations. Like in my, I have this YouTube member group, and we had somebody, we did her chart. She was diagnosed with bipolar, and in my analysis, I said, well, this is more of the manic than the depressive. And then she reported back that her bipolar was more of a manic and not so depressive. So even with manic depression or any of these things, there's so many variations. And
Yeah,
um, some people can have acute depression for a year after a relative dies, when they're older. And I mean, there's just so many um, situations. So, one
Yeah.
thing that I also find is it's what we call in research homogeneity of your
Hmm.
experimental group, if you want to use
Yeah.
fancy
Very
terminology.
important.
But I love this fancy terminology because it makes it clear. The more
Yes.
homogeneous your experimental group, I have found, oh my God, it's night
Yeah.
and day. For example, if I research athletes like Gauquelin did, I
Yeah.
found almost nothing. If I research golfers, if I research tennis players, I get great results because it's a much more homogeneous group. The problem is
So,
you have a much smaller group,
yeah.
but if I have to choose in my own research, everybody's different. I'm not saying,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a personal thing depending on what you do, but for me, I often go to the smaller group that's more homogeneous. Um,
The problem is we want homogeneous and
hmm
big. So that's the
yeah, right.
paradox. So the example you gave, we remember that Gauquelin was replicated in Europe, and the replication didn't work in the United States because there were too much basketball players who are not typical. You remember that.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
wanted to say to Nelson, I agree with his point of view that among the four subjects, that would be maybe the more, from this usefulness, the more interesting. But from diagnosis point of view, it's very tricky. I looked for three persons we had in the list: Samuel Barber, Kirsten Dunst, and Megan Fox. Just three names I picked while you were talking.
Hmm.
And they share that they talked publicly of their extreme melancholy. They had séjour. They were in hospital, but it was not manic depression extreme or suicidal tendencies. It was a temperament melancholy, and it was increased for instance, for Barber because he was homosexual at a period who it was completely rejected.
Right.
So it was part of the was depression. So it's very large.
hmm
So that's the problem. And if you go like you've done bipolar disorder, it restricts your data. So that's a paradox.
hmm
Yeah, back in the 70s when I was interviewing people, I interviewed, had to be mostly women, whose husbands had cheated on them and, it was a real shock. So they went to a therapist and guess what the therapist did? Gave them drugs for depression.
Mm.
If you find out shockingly, and a lot of them had children, that your spouse is cheating and you have no idea, I think you're going to be pretty upset. you know, and their response is, "Oh, you're suffering from depression. Here's an antidepressant." So it's like,
Hmm.
that's a lot different from somebody who just internally, and it wasn't like they were depressive before that. I mean, that's enough to get anybody depressed. You know what I'm saying? And there's just a lot of variability
yeah.
uh, in what's going on.
Well, I would say if we could get access to good, clean data,
Yeah.
a lot of it regarding depression, then we can go forward. If we can't get the kind of data we need to study it, then
Hmm.
we just have to do something else for a while. But it's certainly a worthy topic.
Yes.
Astrologers have their own ideas on what can cause depression.
Our our present
And
discussion. Oh,
even with
excuse me. Excuse me.
even with somewhat messy data,
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
useful patterns will emerge. But
Mm,
ultimately, to really do a definitive
mhm.
study, we're going to need really good data and maybe people who have been,
Yeah.
hospitalized for depression.
It's one of the reasons
Husbands
the
haven't cheated
discussion
on.
we have now is one of the reasons why I picked end of life, not because I'm a Scorpio,
Uh-huh.
but I knew the price when I just wrote on groups in France. I was attacked because they're kind of omerta, the taboo about dying,
Yeah.
and I was criticized by humanistic astrologers saying it was morbid and that it was something not correct to study that in astrology. It was not a gift for humanity to do that. But my reason was that the paradox there is clear cut. You can die of different manners, but it's clear cut and it's universal.
Hmm.
This is the main reason why I picked that subject.
Yeah.
May I give my comments on the four
Oh
Yeah.
topics?
yeah, please.
Yeah.
All of them are very interesting, um, but I'm looking at an even higher level of these four because they are all present at nowadays times. And that is because humanity is put to a test. So I consider all four of them as uh, manifestations of the end of time situation where we are
Mm-hmm.
right in, and that brings let's say causes of those four because they, for instance, I work daily with people having heart attacks and depression, but the cause they are maybe prone to that from many generations. But it also has to do what is going on in the world right now, and especially heart attacks. There's an explosion of heart attacks because of the mRNA vaccines all over the world. There are many people dying because of that. Depression. There's a lot of depression because many people are not really connected to higher powers, which are good, and they lose connection with let's say the higher spirits. End of life is the same, and wars. Yeah, it, it, if you consider the spirituality of this time we are in, all four are quite present. So I support Nelson in his idea that we, as astrologers, we could shed light on all four of them from an even deeper level.
Yeah.
So I would be it for me. It would be nice to see whether we are available. Whether it is possible to analyze the present times in that sense. And I refer again to I did that many times before to a very famous American called Edgar Casey,
Uh-huh.
and with his spiritual view of all problems people can face and also collectively face. So both wars and heart attacks and depression they play a major role nowadays. So uh, I'm involved in many of the medical research with mRNA vaccines all over the world, where good data is available of whether people have taken the vaccines or not, and
Mm-hmm.
whether that causes problems with their heart attacks, with brain injuries, and the present view of the end of times is that humanity is put to the test, how strong humanity is connected to the creator.
Hmm.
And yeah, if they are not, then they are sensitive to all kinds of influences. Yeah, if your spouse is cheating on you, you can choose to be you can make a choice to be depressive, or you can see it in another way. So the mental part, the mental part of how you look at problems in your life and in the world, they are very, very much important whether those problems really manifest. So,
okay, Marsha,
that
excuse me. Okay. Oh, okay. I thought you were finished. Excuse me. Go ahead.
no, but I want to bring in that there is a higher level for all four of them that should be considered.
You're right, but all what you say is more relevant to what we call qualitative research, which could be very useful and very important. In evidence-based quantitative research we do, I'm not sure it would be relevant. It's very subtle. Everything you explain is very interesting, but it's very hard to grasp in quantitative research. And what's the goal of research? One of our goals is, excuse me, but just correct me, Santino, if you don't agree with me, but we want astrology to be recognized, validated. So if we want that, we cannot go in such subtlety. If you want to find something useful, it's not the same goal. It's very correct. But you go
I
in
understand.
qualitative research. But with quantitative research, there are two goals for me. Astrology be validated and maybe improve the tools of astrology.
What
The validation is the most important, I think, at this moment, at this very moment, now in 2025.
Yes.
What do you think?
I do agree, but that you know, I understand, and I understand quite well the difference between qualitative and quantitative research.
Sure.
But whether what you have to use to demonstrate that goes really, what is astrology and how does it work? And if you follow let's say the way Edgar Cayce look at astrology, and he used astrology a lot to explain how it works, and then the spiritual dimension of what a human being is and making choices. Everything has to do with making choices and free will. And apart from things that are not free will, and that should be included in those general topics, at least in the analysis.
I don't know. I don't know how
to make things
that.
more homogeneous.
Yeah.
Part of what I'm hearing is that even though we need to focus on quantitative analysis, each of these topics is very relevant to the time we find ourselves in right now.
Correct.
And so each is really important to get a good grasp of.
So my thoughts on listening to this is that maybe what we need to do is focus on which topics do we want to collect data for, and just put CI out there as like, hey, we're collecting data for this particular topic. Like I started that myself with ADHD because there wasn't enough people in the database that are there. And I know that might not be the most ideal way to do it, for one person to do it and then do research off of it. I'm going to be transparent about that, you know, in the sense of like, hey, you want to look at the data, but at the same time, you know, CI doing it is maybe we need to narrow it down and start figuring out what topics we want to collect for.
That's a really important point. But before we get to that, the collection of data, which I agree is critically important, I want to get back to what Ton and Vincent are discussing. This is like the big picture, right? Like, what are we talking? Where are we? What are we doing? What is the goal of research? Now, the goal for me is not exactly what Vincent explained, but I think it might be just another way of saying it. The goal of research for me, I don't really care what people think of research. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. But what I'm trying to do is to better understand any measurable effects that astrology may have.
Yeah.
That's my personal interest. Now, everybody can have their own personal interest, but things like the spiritual dimension, the choices we make, things like divination, like using the I Ching or other things, to me, that's kind of obvious. Like, I started using the I Ching when I was in high school. I mean, that's fine. I understand that. Everything's a mystery, everything's interconnected. But what I'm curious about is, does astrology actually work? Like, are there measurable effects like that
Mhm.
don't depend on me participating in it? Like when I use the I Ching, it's depending on me connecting to it and resonating with
Yeah.
these things. And that's a real thing, and I use it all the time. But it doesn't interest me in the sense that it doesn't interest me to study exercise. I exercise and it's fine. What I'm curious about is, does astrology actually work? That's what I want to know. I'm just like a kid with a Swiss watch. Does this thing work or not? And that leads to the point about like discussion of Ton and Vincent.
Hmm.
If we take into account the changing times, if your spouse cheats on you, do you just get upset about it, or are you able to see it in some larger perspective in terms of purpose, meaning, how you're creating realities, what you're trying, etc. Um, it's very. I would like to incorporate the things, Ton, that you're talking about, but like Vincent, it's harder for me to get to my goal with that because
Hmm.
how I also, like Vincent, I love qualitative research. I love it, love it, love it. But I love it because it becomes a first step towards quantitative. I better understand what's going on and I can eliminate certain things. But my interest is quantitative, but I use qualitative as a stepping stone to get to quantitative. Because if I go directly to quantitative, I sometimes don't find anything. So it helps me better understand the situation. But so the question is, Ton, if we take into account things like the current situation, can we develop a research design that somebody else can read that research design, replicate it, and come up with the same answers?
I subscribe to what you say
If
100%.
not, I'm not that interested in
I agree. Not only I agree, I prefer your way of explaining research
it.
than what I said about validating. I know that uh, you're sensitive to validation because you told us that you want astrology to be accepted into the walls of university, but this is peripheral. What you say is the most important thing.
Yeah,
Measurable effects.
yeah. So Vincent and I are on the same page. So, Ton, can
Yeah.
we create a research design that takes into account these extremely important things? People are making decisions. It's not the outer situation that just dictates the result. Spouse shocks you with cheating, therefore equals depression. There's all this processing and awareness and all kinds of things going on. But can we use that to have a research study that's replicable by another person
Yeah,
and gets the same results, even if that
yeah.
person does not agree? See, the thing with the bipolar disorder research is I have had a few astronomers read my book on bipolar disorder, and they
Hmm.
said, one of them said to me, I'll just call it BS, but he was swearing at me. He said, you're effing out of your mind, blah, 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 blah. But you're a smart guy. I'll indulge you and I'll read your book. I'll go ahead and pay the $40 and buy it. He read the book. We got on the phone and he said, well, I changed my mind. It's possible. Maybe your stuff
Oh,
actually worked.
ah.
So because my research follows scientific standards, somebody who does not agree with me, changed his mind based on it because the procedures are the procedures and
Mhm.
they're rock solid. And, if it's highly qualitative and if there's a lot of subjective evaluation, it
Yeah,
just doesn't give that high level of confidence.
yeah.
So, Ton,
I'd
how
like
do
to go
you split?
a step further in what Marcia said. Ton,
Tom, Marcia has my
excuse me. How can we include, for instance, the spiritual dimension into a
yeah.
protocol? I don't know. I'm good to design protocol, but now I'm flabbergasted. I don't know what to say. It's too elusive. I don't know how I would do it, even if I find extremely important in my life. And I know Santino said it for
Yeah,
him too.
yeah.
But how can we do research on that?
I want to
That's
reflect on that,
crazy.
yes. Yeah. But let me start first by I want to read something what Edgar Casey in one of his readings said about astrology. Um, and let me read it. He said, "The strongest force used in the destiny of man is the sun first, then the closer planets to the earth, or those that are coming to ascension at the time of the birth of the individual." And then the most important comes, but let it be understood here, no action of any planet or the phases of the sun, the moon, or any of the heavenly bodies surpass the rule of man's willpower.
Mm-hmm. We all agree with that.
And
I
he
mean,
said,
this is not
mind is
this is
ever the
not.
builder.
Yeah, it's okay, but it's good astrology. I mean, it's standard point of view. I think Edgar Case was a lot more impressive about in medicine and human diagnosis of human illness or things like that. In astrology, I mean, that's this correct, but I'm not so impressed. I mean, what you said, it's basic for astrology, and we can test it. I don't indirectly, but there's no challenge.
Well, let me interrupt a second. So, Ton, how would we use that information from
Yeah.
Edgar Casey to help with our research designs?
Yeah, that is the factor that should be included in most of the things is a parameter or a way that we can measure astrologically the level of consciousness for making decisions in life.
Right.
And that is a very basic thing.
Oh, you connect that with the willpower. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
What I have seen is, if, for instance, if people are very well connected, that their let's say their ego planets are connected with in a very good way with the spiritual planets like Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, and there's a good connection between those. Then they can look at problems at a different level, and they make other choices which influence the effect of what is going on in their life. That's basically also what Casey was giving in his readings. There are about 20 or 25,000 readings, and they have also been astrologically analyzed. There's a database. Actually, Santino should know, because there's an advocacy report in Sirius, based upon cases out of the case records, where his qualities of as a seer can be combined with the astrology of the natal.
I have a question of a specific way to apply this idea. We did research on eating disorders, bulimia and anorexia. Would these ideas imply that if we added to our astrosignature, the list of things that incline a person to be anorexic or bulimic, if we added things like inner planets making trines or sextiles to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, and gave that a score, a negative score, so that would help prevent that
Mhm.
problem. Would that be a possible way to
Yeah,
implement this idea?
yeah, that's the way I'm looking at it to yeah, from measurable things like diseases and diagnosis,
Mhm.
and then add also something like that to filter out and to see whether there are differences in
Yeah.
severity of those things, of depression. I think that depression is more severe if you're not very well connected with let's say the meaning of life and your mission.
Okay, so we came up with a way to apply what Vincent and I thought was likely to be too subtle and difficult. We do have a way to include that. We could take the research on bulimia and anorexia. I don't know if it might also work for bipolar disorder. That gave the best results. And we could try adding whatever aspects we think would be a preventative to become a victim of those problems. We can add them to the Astra signature and see if those people are less prone to
I
those.
don't understand. I don't work like that at all. It's important to have an hypothesis. So I'll test this, but you may lose a lot of time doing that. Why not take all the factors? When I do a research, I look at least at 5,000 factors exhaustively. Then I just incline front of the data. I look at the result. What is significant? Then I do a model, and obviously I need to replicate because I didn't have any hypothesis. I got to what how did you say that? Test the model. Then at the end, when you're sure that you have something sound that works with replication and everything, then you go and you interpret what you have. Now I found those factors. What does that mean? So I would prefer to do that, which is reversed of I've got an hypothesis, a kind of prejudice that I think this and this. For that, I I don't in my practice as an astrologer, I carry all those beautiful prejudice. If I lose those prejudice, I'm not an astrologer, practicing astrologer anymore. I don't know
Well,
what
let
to
me let
say.
me just
But in
respond.
but in research, I don't agree with that approach.
No, I think maybe we're not understanding each other because you're just I think we agree actually. The
Yeah,
bipolar disorder research had a strict hypothesis test. We
no,
collected new data, and the effect size of the new data was
I
actually
don't.
slightly larger, better
I know you told
than.
me that
So what
it
I'm
was.
saying
Yeah, I
is,
know, I
so
know.
hold on, let me just finish.
But
What
I
I'm
know that.
saying is that we can take something that has gives us good confidence that it exists, and then modify the astrosignature according to Tan's theory to see if it supports his theory. We don't have to start all over again. We can take an existing model, just like we were saying about Tom Stettle's research on war. We have something that looks really good. We can start from there and modify it. So why don't we take the bipolar disorder, which is good, also the eating disorders, which is also pretty good, and see if Tan's theory can
I think I was not
improve the
clear.
results.
I was not understood. I agree. I know that you replicate your research and you test it.
Right.
So I didn't. I no problem with that. What I say is, why select in advance the big certain factors? Why not calculate everything that we got? I mean, we got computers. Instead of looking at a few hundred factors, you look at 10,000 factors and you look at the results. Then you just eliminate what doesn't work, and you look at the factors that individually significant, then you do a signature by combining them. And if Tom, what's his name? Tom
Ton.
is right. You will probably discover that fast planet in good aspect to spiritual planet is negative. It is against the signature. So negative coefficient in bipolar disorder, because it's positively against it. So you'll see it. And why just focus on our this is intuition, or I feel that this and this, like you said, Tom. You may be right, but the research, I don't need to focus just on that. I look at everything. It doesn't cost more than do 10,000 factors than do 100 factors. We got the computers.
Yeah, I know, I understand. Let me put it this way. If you study depression, you're looking for people having been diagnosed as depression. But there are many people who have a proneness to depression out of the genetics and astrology, but are not diagnosed depressive.
Yeah. So
because they can deal with it. They can deal with it, and that's what I try to highlight. That people that have a depression,
you don't have access to those people. There, you don't have a diagnosis. So maybe you look at your friends around you, but if you need 1,000 person, you won't find them. That's the difference between clinical research with 30 people, which is very interesting, that we all do intuitively when we practice astrology, and formal research. And you need hundreds and hundreds of facts to be sure that you find something true.
Yeah. I understand, but let's go back to what we agree upon.
Okay.
And that is that we trying to do things that help humanity to understand what is going on in all those four major things: wars, end of life, heart attack, depression. And that's what Nelson brought in. The way I see astrology working, and not me, but it's a very well researched person like Edgar Cayce. He is quite well researched and known for his gifts to help humanity. And he said that astrology is very useful, but astrology is very useful to build more awareness so that you can make better decisions. If you understand it. So and that factor is important, and I think it is important in all of these, because I know many people suffering from heart attacks because they did not realize what they were dealing with when they took the mRNA shots. They did not have the faintest idea what was going on with those shots, which are completely genetically they are dangerous the way they have been applied to humanity. And we are now facing explosions of turbo diseases, turbo cancers, turbo Parkinson's, turbo heart attacks because of that. And every
that's a good example. We are on the same page on that question.
Great.
I could be considered as a complotist, as we say in French. We're on the same page.
Right.
But I dreamed the day that we would have strong, formal proof, stronger than what we have now. It's going to be very hard, but there's a lot of bad fate, of malpractice, cheating in the research, that type of research. But this is a good example. Intuitively, I agree with you totally on that question about RNA vaccine, so-called vaccine. But this is exactly the problem that we have with astrology. We are considered, as you and me and others are considered, about the toxicity of the so-called unvaxxed. So we agree, but we don't have something very strong that we can put on the table and we have a proof. You know why? Because there's a lot of cheating, obviously. So I'm a bit pessimistic about that question, by the way.
Let me
The
let me just
mafia is too big. The mafia is too big.
Oh yeah.
let me just ask Tom a question. So, Tom, what research design do you have a research design for one of these four topics
Mm,
that you think that you would like? Like, I mean, that would maybe help take into account. Like I gave the example of including aspects to outer planets as something that would be a preventative against these things. So, like when you create an astrosignature, basically a regression model, a list of variables that contribute to some outcome variable, we can have positive coefficients and negative coefficients. There's weights to each variable.
mhm,
So we can have negative weight for Sun, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, trine or sextile Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They would, by giving them a negative weight, they decrease your tendency, your score for vulnerability to those problems.
mhm,
Um, so Vincent is saying, we can just put all these things in there and see what comes out. But I also don't see a problem with if you have a hunch to
mm,
put that hunch in there. In fact, I think that every research has hunches. Everyone has a
mm.
theoretical framework. So, for example, Vincent, in your research, you're not including a lot of Vedic factors
No,
or medieval factors or,
no,
mutual reception or fixed star, whatever.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah, so we
Mhm.
all have some assumptions.
Yes.
I agree with Vincent that it's good to be fairly broad, but there's no such thing as not having some assumptions in there. And
Yeah.
if a lot of astrologers are already confident that they know, and that's a certain set of variables work. I think it's good for the astrologer to feel free to do whatever they feel. Like if they feel they're confident about a set of variables, they should do it and find out. So,
Mhm.
so, Ton, what ideas do you have for research design? I don't know if you have clear ideas that would help approach one of these or more of these four topics that would take into account the things that you think are important? Is there some like change or approach that would help work?
Um, I try to think about it and how to answer this. Um, um, the way you said that, let's say, I want to respond also to Vincent. No, that there's a difference between bottom-up research where you have all the data and look what you can extract from that, and there's the other things that you mentioned also, Centino, that you have a, let's say, a idea or assumptions, but those are not my ideas. Those are ideas by very well-known research people. And if you study, for instance, the work by Bruno Huber and Sassoli and Jung and Casey, then you can learn a lot of what kind of assumptions you can make based upon what they have done with their life research, with their insights. So I try to combine from both ways. I'm not against what Vincent said, but looking in data without an idea what you're looking for. uh,
Mhm.
I'm a physicist from training, so I'm lazy. I try to understand first principles first before I start looking at all the data. So I want to see yeah, with a yeah, I want to combine a microscope and a telescope in my research, both. So one is very, very broad, and that can only be modeled by some ideas. For instance, by the persons I mentioned, Esther Jolie, Bruno Huber, Edgar Casey. You
Yeah,
can look, you can use that what they
yeah.
have brought up, and on the other that I'm very much in favor of having good data and looking up and trying to extract as much. So those two things should be in my research.
Hmm.
I would like to combine both ways.
So, Tom, if I understand, for instance, a protocol would be, maybe if I understand well, go into the Casey, Edgar Casey, it was a great medium, lectures, and
Readings.
try in the readings and yeah, readings, and try to find statements that you could test. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's one way, but the same holds also for the work that Bruno Huber and Asocioli have done on a psychological level, and what yeah
Okay.
Carl Gustav Jung has done. Those data are available, the research data, or you can try to find them. Um, and furthermore, there are also present data in the medical research I'm involved in heart attacks and turbo cancers and turbo neurodegenerative diseases that popping up like hell the last decades. Um, so yeah, I have to think further how we can combine that, but I think that it is a factor if you try to interpret depressions and you collect data that you also have a wider view of what we're looking at. So that is what Satina tried to say. Well, maybe we can include some filtering or some parameters to see whether that makes a difference or not. And what I said, if you look at depressive people only, but and you have in your data, you have people diagnosed with depression, but there are also many people that are depressed, have the depressive tendencies, but they do not exhibit that because and that is the other part of the going. Is that should be included as well. Why do they have a very high proneness to depression and they do not have it? Because they can deal with it. Those things. That's what I try to add to the research, to any research approach of those four.
Yeah, the research that I do is very similar, Ton, to what you're describing. So, for example, in the bipolar disorder, we looked at a few of Giselle's clients. We looked at, I think, about 10 of them. And we just studied them, and we were really pleasantly impressed that what we saw in their charts fit our theories very, very well. It added a twist to it that they had a depressive configuration and a manic configuration. At first, I thought there would be a manic depressive configuration, but it was two separate configurations. So, in looking at it, the depressive configuration is exactly the kind of thing we think is depressive. The manic were exactly the kinds of things we thought were manic. So, what we did was we took data from Gauquelin and we created a general principle, but we didn't specify the details. So the general principle was that Jupiter in a 13 vibe tends to be narcissistic. Uranus in an 11 vibe tends to have low impulse control, and Saturn in 7 vibe tends to be extremely introverted. but we didn't know what 11 vibe it is. It could be 11, 22, 33, 44, 66,
Hmm.
88, 176. We didn't know how high it would go. So we didn't know exactly which planets might be more important. Would Sun Uranus be worse than Mars Uranus? We thought Mars Uranus would be greater loss of impulse control, but we're not sure. So we had a general idea, and then within that general idea, we saw what the data told us.
Yeah.
And then we built a formula to fit what we found in the Gauquelin data. And then we found, I think it was 70 cases from Astro Databank, which are not in the Gauquelin data. And with only 70 cases, we got statistical significance in high effect sizes. So that was the test. So bottom line of what I'm saying is when I do research very often, I do some anecdotal evidence, just look at some charts to see if things are making sense. Then I try to get a database with some general principles, but not specifying every detail. And then if I'm really smart, I will use half the data or a third of it, and then I use the rest
Hmm.
to test.
Yeah.
So basically, I think it's what you're saying. You have some general principles, like you want a telescope and a microscope. The telescope is you get some general principles from the Hubers, Assagioli, Jung, Edgar Casey, et cetera, some basic ideas. And within that, you can build a model and see how the details work out and then test it with some new data. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, for instance, if I go into what you're saying, and of course I've studied your book extensively, and we will talk about it pretty soon again. But yeah, those parameters that you're talking about the seventh harmonics, the 11th harmonics, and the Saturn, that kind of stuff in as parameters. If you then look for people having high proneness according to those parameters, and they do not have a lot of problems in their life with it, then I would be very interesting to see whether their level of consciousness or connectedness spiritually makes sense. So that is a way to look at it, and to see if you find people out of any database that show a high proneness to bipolar disorder problems, and they don't have it, then we should not reject it that they do not have it, but try to understand why it is not manifested in a way that other people. And I think it has to do with consciousness. If you can grasp higher vibrations, you have a conscious connection with those higher vibes. You can feel them and understand them and make decisions because you feel it. Then you make other decisions than when you don't have a connection with those higher vibes, and then everything is unconsciously controlled in your life. Things happen because you are not connected with those higher vibes that shows you vulnerability to any disease, or in this particular case, bipolar disorder.
right. Let me ask you a question and see if you agree with this or not. What I'm excited about is that once we have a study that gives good results, like say the bipolar disorder research, basically what that does is it gives you a score for how prone you are to bipolar disorder. It's like an IQ score, or a test score. Everybody has a score. Now, what's exciting is that once we have a score that actually really works, we can take any other astrological variable and see if it better discriminates between the shuffled
Yes.
control group. So if certain aspects to Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, whatever, make you less vulnerable to these problems, we can add that
Yeah.
to our regression formula, which is what an astro signature is. We
I
can
don't
add
understand.
it, and then it would better discriminate between the control group and the experimental group.
Would
So
you explain it bit, more detail. I don't understand. I thought the weights were doing that in your model. So is there something I missed?
Okay, let's say let me just bring up this file and make it visual. Let's say an oversimplified example. Let's say you think that depression. I'm going to make this like Sun in Capricorn. Uh, we're going to give it a weight of 5, and we're going to say Sun in Gemini equals -3, like it prevents depression, and Sun in 12th house, equals 8, and so on. And you can make this long list
Mm-hmm.
of every variable, Sun square Saturn, Moon square Saturn, whatever you want. You make this long list, and these are your coefficients. And this is a regression formula. It's a linear regression. You have just all these things. Now, what I do in the research is I have the people who have depression, and then I have the shuffled control group. And then I see, do the experimental group, the people with depression, are there scores? Like if I have Sun in Capricorn and Sun in the 12th house, I have a score of 13. I'm like really prone to depression. But if I have Sun in Gem, well, you get the idea. You just total this up. It's very simple. So if there's another variable, like aspects to outer planets, conjunctions to fixed stars, zodiac signs, dispositors, whatever, anything that's going to make a person, like if Sun trine Neptune is going to help prevent this, I can give it a -2, and so on. And then if this improves the formula by adding this, my statistical significance will go up. So once you have a formula that works, you can just add in new variables or change weights and see if it improves the
Yeah, but
formula.
what I don't understand, if you have, let's say, 3 variables in the first 3 in your regression,
Yeah.
and you want to see what is the effect of Sun trine Neptune, because individually it looks significant. You want to add it. You just put it in the data, and you make a new regression, which will optimize your weight. So you don't the -2 will be calculated by the regression, a new regression.
Well,
Is that what you
yes,
mean?
that's true too. That's true. Yeah, yeah, we can leave the weights out. I think that's even a better idea. Good, that's a good idea. So
It's
what we can
simpler,
do, let's remove the weights.
and you do it again.
We can remove the weights. I like that idea better. That's great. Thank you. That's a great idea. We remove the weights. We just say, I think Sun trine Neptune is important for depression. My expectation is it's going to prevent depression. But rather than me guess, this is the balance between what Todd called the microscope and the telescope. My big view is that Sun trine Neptune's related, but I agree with you completely, Vincent, and I'm glad you mentioned that. That rather than me guess that it should have a negative weight, I'll just add it to my formula. And then you run the regression, and it will tell. That's what regression does. It will tell you what the weight is.
Yeah.
And Todd is expecting that this is going to get a negative coefficient. If it gets a negative coefficient, then that confirms his expectation, and we have an improved model. If it doesn't have a negative coefficient in general, the things that he expects, then it's not helping. And
Yes.
so I agree. That's the balance between your assumptions and being open-ended. And Vincent, I like your idea better. Let's leave it out and see. It'll change all the weights and see what it does. Now, in my research on bipolar, there's some other things I won't go into. It gets kind of complicated. But essentially, within this context of this conversation, that's what we can do. Just add any variable you think is important. We could be adding fixed stars, all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
Recalculate the weights and see what comes out.
Yes,
Yeah.
we agree.
There's some things that I did to prevent what we call in knowledge discovery overfitting, and it gets a little more involved. But I didn't actually use any weights because I didn't want to be too dependent on fitting to the data, and I wanted to stick with uh, astrological principles. Anyway, there's different theories, but if you use the weights produced, you can get overfitting. Now, one of the amazing things, Vincent, in your research is you created a model, you used the weights, and those weights work perfectly when you tested it with new data. So that's really impressive. But anyway, there's different approaches.
But what I don't like in my research, if I compare with what you describe, this is a weak point. The factors are becoming like pixels. It's pixelized. For
Mhm.
instance, my transit model, the best model, the best fitting model is with 198 factors. If I reduce the number of factors by selecting the most significant, the fitting is not as good. The p-value is not as good.
Yeah.
And I include the replication. The best replication testing, I mean, completely independent. I take my model, which gives me minus 116 p-value 116 0. That looks impressive, but that means nothing if you don't replicate. You know that.
Yeah.
But the best replication I have, minus 5, is with 198 factors. And when you look at those factors, they look non-significant. I mean, they look pixels. It's like nonsense. If you look at a pixel, if I look at your picture and I just extract a few pixels, I won't know it's Santino. I need the
Right.
full picture. So my research is more and more pixelized, and I don't feel good with that. If I
Yeah.
compare with what you do, it's not elegant.
It's not elegant, but one hopeful sign maybe is that this is the same problem they run into with genetics research. When they
Oh,
look for the genetic markers for obesity, they ended up with several thousand, and each one of those genes that inclines to obesity is extremely insignificant, like extremely,
yes.
but when you combine them together, you only get a very slight tendency to obesity. It's not like, your diet, and exercise are much more important, but there is a genetic component. But they ran into the same problem that you're running into, is like
Yeah.
we just have thousands of things that almost mean nothing, but we put it together and we get
Yes.
something. So maybe, I mean, this is a problem with research. We're making discoveries. We don't know how the world works. And it can be upsetting, but maybe that's how it works. So,
This is it. This is it. You explain it very well.
yeah,
This is it. Exactly.
I think when you do research, like all this stuff I do with vibrational astrology, 40 years ago, it was actually 50 years ago, when I started doing the research, I didn't believe it. I said, this is crazy. Like the
Mm.
first time I used something like the 11th harmonic, I said, that's crazy. The 11th harmonic can't possibly work. Nobody's ever used that. And I just, this is nuts. This makes no sense at all. And, now I'm into vibrations that are in the thousands and it doesn't bother me. So, this is part of the process is sometimes our assumptions. I mean, if I went with my assumptions, I would be nowhere today because
Hmm.
almost all my assumptions were wrong. My intuition's terrible, but I did follow the data. And the data convinced me I needed to think about everything in a different way. So, you're following the data and the data looks screwy, it's not elegant, but this is what happens. And at some point it clears up, I guess.
But you were more courageous than me going there because my data is I just climb on the shoulders of Ebertin with midpoints, and it's a giant. He's a giant. I feel confident, and it works. But
Yeah.
you took a lot bigger risk than me.
Yeah, well, it was a slow process. I mean, but yeah, I mean, over decades, I ended up way out in left field, like in a totally different idea of what astrology is from like everybody else, including John Addy and stuff. My
Yeah,
astrology does not actually resemble the astrology
no,
of Harmonic
no.
astrologers at all.
I read him. It was not helpful for you.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
it was, it helped get me
you know.
going, but
Yeah,
I had to
yeah,
leave Addie's frame of
yeah,
mind
yeah.
to, because the data was pointing me elsewhere. So yeah, you never know. I mean, that's the thing about research is you learn, and sometimes what you learn is uncomfortable. So, and sometimes it's confusing. And,
Hmm.
It, it's
you
a
know,
very interesting discussion. Um, but to get somewhere, I think we need to get back to finding a distinct test group.
Hmm.
Or,
a distinct test group. What do you mean, Bernard?
well, we were discussing these four propositions
Yeah.
of depression and so on. And I think that's how what we're going to test and what our hypothesis is. That comes later, right? And then so I um, to continue what others already said about these. I think heart attack is certainly distinct, and that is also something that one should be able to retrieve data on
Right.
when actual and also, I mean, what's interesting about heart attacks is that you can have multiple heart attacks for one individual, right?
Hmm.
So you can
Yeah.
actually which makes it much more interesting, because then you get a stronger dynamic between transits and natals. And with the four that are on board right now, um, the most difficult are the first one and the last one. Depression is there's always, I mean, for example, ADHD was mentioned. The latest thing that I've been reading about ADHD is that people that diagnosis ADHD, they're having it retracted.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's the latest fad. Yeah,
Yep.
Exactly.
and regarding wars, I mean, um, if I don't want to be too pessimist, but I don't think. I mean, there are philosophers that say that we live in constant war.
Yeah.
That it's not a matter of end times. It's and really that's incredibly interesting. When does a war start?
Hmm.
One of the main, if we're going to look at our time, we're talking about proxy war all the time. I don't. The proposition of looking into wars, are you really going to include proxy wars? Incredibly
It's been
difficult.
done very correctly by Tom Settle in the last issue of Correlation. Gods of War. That's really amazing. Maybe should read that, Bernard. He answered that
Yeah, I
stuff.
will. I will. I
It-
will try to get
oh,
around to it.
you
But
love it. You love it.
yeah. But you have philosophers like Evola. They say that life is a constant war, right? And
Yeah.
then with
Yes.
nationhood, that becomes even more. War becomes even more fundamental to the nation. So so to that's really difficult.
Yeah.
And
You're right. But if you have certain objective, you're right. But if you just design artificially or arbitrarily specific criteria and you follow them to the blind, I mean, you're just stupidly follow your
Yeah.
criteria and you find
Well,
something you're
uh,
happy. This is what he's done. So you got literature to help you to do that.
yeah. Let me just summarize this. In research, we like well-defined variables.
Yes.
So a heart attack is well defined, death is well defined, depression's not as well defined, war is not as well defined. So what Tom Stendhal did in his research on war is he created a clear definition of what is war and what is not war. However, those definitions, somebody could come up with a different definition. But he came up with a definition and he got good results. But the point is, he had to work to get a definition. With something like
Yes.
a heart attack, it's more clearly defined and you don't have to do as much work. And there's a fundamental term we have in research called measurement error. With heart attacks and end of life, there's very little measurement error. In other words, there's some, but not much. A heart attack is a heart attack. Pretty much. I mean, there's still some, I mean, you could have like a mild heart attack. Is it a heart attack or not? There's still some measurement error. But the point is, if you have to struggle to define what the variable is, you're going to have more measurement error. But if your research, if your variables really work, they will work despite measurement error. And apparently, Tom Stendhal's variables work so well, they work despite the fact he had to define it. So anyway, Bernard makes an excellent point. I think we all agree that heart attacks and end of life are easier to research and better defined. And if you're going to deal with some of the other things, you have to work hard to find an operational definition of exactly what those things are. And it makes the research a little, you have more measurement error, but doesn't prevent it, just makes it more
and
difficult.
the argument against end of life, I think would be more one of purposeful counseling. Is that
Yes.
if one wants to motivate research ethically, uh, for a study that has some sort of findings regarding heart attack, that could actually be put into use. But finding some sort of astrological correlates for the end of life, unless you believe in reincarnation, use necessarily. I'm thinking of
I agree. I agree.
one of the researchers on the life was Hawk. He calculated his own life too far into the future. So he was planning on retiring in Florida, but he never got around to it. So there are also ethical issues
Yeah.
involved in
Yeah,
everything,
you're right.
in all our choices.
I've got something to say about that. So I agree with you. First, the model is not effective on individual base. So the significance is about the group. So the only usefulness, practical usefulness, would be for insurance company with how do you say that in English? Actuarial calculation.
Mhm.
The model could be one of the variables that actuaries use, but I won't sell them to them. um, but it's unethical, and hopefully it's not applicable for individuals.
Yeah. Well, what a fantastic discussion. I don't think we decided yet on which of the four we're going to do, but this is a fantastic discussion. I want to mention that Ton, Bernard, and Nelson are all in Europe. And
Oh wow.
in case I you weren't here at the beginning, one of the things we're considering is having two meetings, one that would be evening in Europe and one that would be evening in the United States, because they're burning the midnight oil, as we say. And if you're okay with that, we're okay with it. But we, Cosmobiology Institute, we need to be working with the whole world and wherever we're getting
Mhm.
response. And the interest and motivation in Europe and also a lot of experience and talent coming from there that's helping us. So anyway, I just want everybody to be aware this is a nonprofit organization. We're just here to promote international research. It's nobody's property, it's nobody's domain. It's just getting together and moving things forward. I'm excited that we have a small group here, but a very interested and involved group. And some of those who are quiet, like Emmett and Kai, they're doing fantastic things too. I mean, Emmett's creating code, and Kai's got spreadsheets from here till kingdom come with all kinds of data that makes my eyes gloss over. So, I mean, people are working at stuff. It's very exciting. And I just want to thank all of you for being here. It's we've done our hour and a half. Does anybody want to say any last words? Otherwise, we can finish here. And at the next meeting, or we can decide. We could also maybe do two projects. Maybe some of us could be doing one, some could be doing others. But I think this was very fruitful because this is what research is all about. A lot of it is just assessing the reality of the situation. It's not all about just statistics. It's about considering what's feasible and how you can approach it. And also we had a lot of discussion of literature review, Tom Stendel's work on wars, etc. So that's important for future research. Any last comments from any of you? And then we'll close up for the night.
Maybe myself. Okay, I'm in Europe, but only for more 2 weeks. I'm going to move to Brazil, so I'll
Oh,
be
Oh,
wow.
quite closer to your
closer.
time.
Yes.
You're moving to Brazil. Oh my
I'm
God.
Wow.
moving to Brazil, yes. So that will change a
Okay.
bit.
Well, you'll still be speaking Portuguese, but
I'll still
Yeah.
be speaking in Portuguese, yes, pretty much.
wow, that's a big move. Okay, because I know you have a wife and a child and everything. So, wow, big stuff. Okay, all
You
right. So,
know, some things they do have to happen, so it's astrologically correct.
yeah, no, a big move like that can be tricky, but
It is.
yeah, wow. Okay, all
If
right.
I had a subject, if I had to choose among those four, all things considered, for all the reasons we discussed, I think the most fruitful, since Christopher already got excellent results on certain factors. He didn't talk, but he worked on that. We know that Christopher worked on heart attack. That would be my choice to increase to get a multivariate model. I think that would be the most fruitful because depression is not clear cut. War, it's same problem. Other problem also. Do we work with transits on charts, country charts, or mundane? There's a lot of problems.
Mhm.
And heart attack is mostly clear cut. What do you think, Christopher?
Well, maybe I wish there was more data at Astro Databank on heart attacks.
Oh,
There's kind of enough, 400 something, but could use more. I'm really intrigued by end of life because you've already done some excellent research on it. This other guy, Alexei, he's getting started on some research on primary directions and end of life. And it's easy to look at charts of people who have died and
yes.
just do astrological autopsies on them to get some
It's easy, yes.
ideas of what might be
Yes.
relevant. So since everyone dies, it's not that much of a problem getting down.
Mhm. And I can
Yeah,
offer my
it's a
data,
project to die for.
can offer my data, Christopher. I got a few thousands
Yeah,
of a good data, AA data, a few thousands.
Okay, let's
yeah.
wrap up by having votes here. Nelson, I've got you down for depression. I don't know if you've changed your mind. Kai, I've
No,
got
I can help in other projects as
no, but
well.
what is just what is what is everybody's preference? Like if you like the depression, Vincent likes the heart attack, Christopher likes end of life. Kai, I think you're still probably with wars, but you might change your mind. Anybody else want to vote? Ton, or you could vote for more than one if you're kind of split. Starlene, Emmett, Kai, you guys have any,
Yeah,
Bernard, anybody want to
yeah,
I
I
have
Is it
agree.
been,
too
oh,
late
go
to
ahead.
add one?
go ahead, Kai? What did you say?
I have been Googling around looking for data sets, and there is non-astrological research on birth months and heart attacks and natal birth months and heart attacks that's out there that we could look through. The war data sets, there'd be tons of information. Um, I can't find anything depression data sets outside of Astro Databank.
Right. Okay, so you're still with the wars. You like that idea? Emmett, do you have I'll go through each one of you. Do you have a preference?
Yeah, so I agree with Kai. I am interested in wars because I don't really have any experience doing with that kind of astrology. So it'd be interesting to see. I
Okay.
am interested in depression though, just because like I think it's like we should do research to try to get some kind of results or whatever. But I think that also would give us like practice like narrowing down the scope of a question and just looking more like the mechanics and questions like behind the actual like
Yeah.
astrological going on.
So I'm putting E1. I'm saying your first vote is wars, your second is depression. Does that fit kind of?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. I mean, this is just rough approximation. And Nelson, I've got you for depression. And Bernard, do you want to take a vote here for what you like best?
Um, I'd like to add one. Is
Okay.
that too late?
No, no,
No,
it's
no,
cool.
no.
Driving under the influence.
Oh, wow.
Driving drunk. Um,
Yeah.
okay, what else do you like?
Heart attack.
Heart attack. And if anybody wants to vote for driving drunk, I don't know about getting data for that, but
We worked on accident, Santino and I, and we
yeah,
know how it's difficult to get those private data. I
yeah,
know
Okay.
I know an astrologer, mathematician in Quebec, who works for the government, and he refused. He got access to those files, and
yeah,
he refused to give them to me because he said I lose my job if
yeah,
ever.
it's privacy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Starlene, what do you vote for? You have a vote?
Um, I like wars. I think wars are interesting. I mean, I think they all are, but if I was
Yeah.
gonna pick probably war, yeah.
And Ton?
I have two favorites. Heart attacks because that gives the best practical
Mhm.
defined research. But I vote for depression because that has a very high link with spiritual awareness.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we got heart attack
So
and depression for Ton, and I'm just making those equal. And who else do we have here?
Sa-
Vincent,
Santino, Santino.
myself.
Oh yeah.
Um, I kind of like end of life because I'd like to test that guy's ideas on primary directions.
Mhm.
Um, and we have a lot of data on end of life. The Gauquelins collected this huge amount of data.
Pay attention. You got Starlene and Santino with an S.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you should put David.
No, no, he's dead. I killed him. Uh,
His
A
life
joke.
ended.
yeah,
I'm
no.
like,
Somebody told me who's a techie. He said David was the first instance. I thought it was a cool way of putting it. In software, we have instances, but anyway, I thought that was a cool way of putting it. Starlene Brighter. Okay. Um, Well, we're pretty evenly distributed here. Well, let's leave it at that. We've got depression and heart attack and wars have 3 votes. So maybe we'll do more than one thing. We can pick up with this next time and start something. But this was a fantastic discussion. It was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Um, okay, we're all good. We'll pick up. I'll keep these notes for our next meeting
Yeah.
in a month, and we'll start into these. And in the meantime, you might have some thoughts about next time we'll regroup and decide what to pursue. The only reason I like end of life is because this fellow, another European, wants to research primary directions. He's got a lot of good technical background. He's totally convinced that primary directions work, and he wants to see it. And Vincent has secondary progressions and now transits working, and it just seems to build on that nicely. Um,
Yeah.
so, uh, and it's like Bernard, I like things that are well defined. And even though Tom Stendhal did great research on wars, I kind of feel like Bernard, like what's not a war? I mean, it's just to me, it's kind of um, I don't know. It's hard to define, and I think historians often define what is a war and what isn't a war. Um, and I don't know. But I
But
guess Tom Stendhal found a good way to do that. Hmm?
you remember that maybe you read it. Tom make a distinction between what he called aggregated war or non-aggregated. I mean, many wars at a time going on, or only one country. It's
Yeah,
part of his model.
yeah, that's really good. Yeah, there are graphs. I've seen graphs of like mundane violence. Like, they take all the violence going on in the world. Historians have done this, and they have a graph for when violence goes up and down.
Robert Curie worked on that too.
Yeah. But, everybody's different, and I just like to start with well-defined things. It's just everybody,
Mhm.
this is the thing too about being research that I want to encourage everyone. Be yourself. There's no one way.
Mhm.
People have slightly different preferences and whatever, and all these things are important. And sometimes when you follow your instincts and your intuition and what feels right, that also fits the rules. It just, there's not just one way. There's a lot of, you can balance things for how you
Mhm.
want to work.
Mhm.
Uh,
Excuse me, I gotta go. It was fun.
yeah,
Bye
this
to
was fun.
everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's end
Yeah.
Bye
here.
bye.
Thanks,
Bye
everyone.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Good
Thanks,
night.
for coming to
Thanks.
see.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.